Open the second hearing of the Senate Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade References Committee's inquiry into the management of defence and state assets. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. The committee will be conducting today's hearing in person and via teleconference. I'm Senator Collins, Chair of the committee, and I'm joined in the room by Deputy Chair Senator Ciccone and Senator Shoebridge. Senators Lambie and McLaughlin will also be joining us by teleconference. These are public proceedings being audio streamed live via the Parliament's website, and a Hansard transcript is being made. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence. Witnesses also have a right to request to be heard in camera. The Senate has resolved that an officer of the Department of the Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer or to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. If the witness objects to answering a question, they should state the ground upon which the objection is made, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer, having regard to the ground which is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that an answer be given in camera. Commonwealth officers appearing today are also reminded of the Senate order specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. A copy of the order is available from the Secretariat. I remind senators of their obligations under the Behaviour Code for Australian parliamentarians to treat witnesses with dignity, courtesy, fairness and respect. I remind committee members and witnesses who are appearing via teleconference and who are not speaking to please mute their microphones. Okay, I now welcome the Air Force Association and Mr David Chaplin, Wing Commander, RAAF Reserve. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to the Senate being given to the Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today? Mr Bushell, can we start with you, please?
My name is John Allen Bushell. I appear representing the Air Force Association.
And Mr Chaplin?
My name is David Chaplin, Mr David Chaplin, and I'd like to confirm that I appear as an individual and my submission does not represent the views or position of any organisation.
Thank you very much. I now invite each of you to make a short opening statement, and at the end of the conclusion of any remarks, I will invite members of the committee to ask questions. Mr Bushell, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you. I'm honoured to appear before the Senate Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade References at this hearing representing the Air Force Association. In the Association submission relating to the defence estate of RAF Williams, Point Cook, we do not oppose the decision of the Defence Assets Review to divest the most historical base of military and civil aviation in Australia, but rather we recommend a way forward through the establishment of a community trust to manage the nationally significant Air Force Base at Point Cook. As detailed in our submission, Point Cook is the most important aviation heritage site. Before the 1914-18 war, the Central Flying School was established at Point Cook, and Australia's first airmen trained in that school. Many went overseas, initially to the Middle East, where Lieutenant George Mears, killed in action on 30th of June 1915 in Mesopotamia, was the service's first combat fatality. Mears had graduated from the first flying course at Point Cook. Another of the men on that first course was Lieutenant Richard Williams, who served with distinction in the Middle East in World War I and subsequently became the father of the Royal Australian Air Force, hence RAAF Williams, Point Cook. The advantages of a community trust that our association commends are detailed in our submission. In this introduction, I emphasise the following. A community trust is the best model to ensure benefits of employment and heritage tourism while retaining the national heritage the national heritage significance of the site. Preservation of the nationally significant heritage site with easier access for a community is more appropriate than redevelopment for housing with consequent infrastructure impact. Historic memorials were purposefully located at Point Cook in view of its preeminence in military aviation history, and their location must be preserved. There is a natural environment value in retaining the open space buffer with the adjoining Ramsar Treaty wetlands and environmentally sensitive Point Cook Coastal Park. In conclusion, we recognise the inevitability of change and strongly advocate for that change to recognise and preserve our heritage. In the case of RAAF Williams, Point Cook, with the management to be assumed by a community trust. That concludes my introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bushell. Mr. Chaplin, would you like to make an opening statement?
Good afternoon, Senators, and thank you for the invitation to appear before the committee. My submission relates to matters of loss beyond history and heritage should the Point Cook airfield close. My two concerns are loss to regional security related to Point Cook's potential use during a regional threat response, and secondly, loss to regional youth development related to Point Cook's use for cadet aviation training and development during their formative years. On my first concern of security, the Australian Government's publicly available national security website states that, and I quote, Australia's general terrorism threat level is probable, meaning there is greater than 50% chance of an onshore attack or attack planning in the next 12 months, unquote. In this regard, Melbourne's population is now around 5.5 million people. Geelong's population exceeds 300,000, so just under 6 million people currently live around Port Phillip Bay. These numbers are forecast to grow. Whilst every other mainland capital city has a military airbase close by and available for a threat response, the Melbourne Basin may be an exception if Point Cook were to close. In this regard, Point Cook as an operating airbase is uniquely located on the Melbourne Basin between Melbourne and Geelong CBDs and close to valuable assets such as ports, sporting arenas, and one of the nation's 2 remaining oil refineries. Point Cook is accessible by air, land and sea. Its airfield is in very good condition. It's regularly used and able to be secured. Indeed, only in the last couple of weeks, residents witnessed Army Black Hawk helicopters operating from Point Cook, and this was promoted on local television news, practicing security missions around the Melbourne CBD. I don't believe any other regional airfield could adequately replace this capability in times of need. On the second concern regarding aviation training, Point Cook offers excellent location and infrastructure for use in flying training, including Air Force cadet flying. The proximity to Melbourne and Geelong enables easy daily travel for cadets, parents, volunteer instructors and other local staff. The Air Force Cadet website explains more fully that cadet flying programs are safety focused and aim to inspire and motivate young Australians towards their potential. Should Point Cook be fully sold, I believe that there is no facility close to Melbourne and Geelong where cadet aviation operations could effectively be relocated without significant expense or the loss of benefits offered by the current facilities at Point Cook. And that's the closure of my opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaplin. And I'm going to start with the questions, Senator Collins here. And Mr. Bushell, Mr. Chaplin, we actually had a site visit this morning to Point Cook, and it was a pretty remarkable space. You could really get a sense of the historical significance down there, but also the fact that it is a well-used space and one that, as you say, Mr. Chaplin, has strategic value. I'm wondering, does it make sense to you both that a place of such strategic value would be disposed of? Mr. Chaplain, maybe you could reflect on your comments about the base's unique access to land, air and sea.
Thanks, Senator. Yes, it is a unique location, and particularly when I believe public information is that the whole area is meant to exceed the population of Sydney over the next few decades. I used to be a helicopter pilot many years ago, 30 years ago, when the Air Force actually conducted counter-terrorist operations. So I'm quite familiar with some of the similar operations that have been conducted out of Point Cook, currently by Army. The flying time from Point Cook to those strategic areas is quite small. So, for instance, if a helicopter needed to fly from Point Cook to the CBD, it would be done within 5 or 10 minutes. Similar to Geelong and the refinery areas, the ports, all around the same time. There are similar time frames, maybe a little bit longer with all the other capital cities. So from an air access point of view, it's a very close and very short time flying to pretty much anywhere around the bay. You could cross it over to the other side of the bay. Normal helicopter speeds in around 5 to 10 minutes. The nearest base alternative would be West Sale, and that's about an hour's helicopter flying away. So you've also got the land access, so it's close to the Geelong Freeway, the Westgate Freeway, which is known, and fairly easy access in and out of the base with road junctions there. Sea access is a little restricted, however, because Point Cook is actually based on the sea. It has a beachfront, so there's access there. There's currently no facility that allows harbouring access. Many years ago, there's a long wharf there which is currently derelict, but it was used for flying boats many years ago, and there was sea access built into the base. That hasn't been used for a while, but is still a potential use if needed.
And so if we were to enter into a conflict, that would be that there is no other comparable site around Melbourne that would provide the strategic value that this site provides. Is that correct?
That's my view, Senator, yes.
Mr. Bushell, you described Point Cook, or your submission described Point Cook as the birthplace of military aviation and the RAAF and the spiritual home of the RAAF, and it points to the stories of the first deployments there having become legend. So what do you think would be the significance for serving and veteran members to be working on the same sites as their legendary forebears? Mr. Bushell? Can you hear us?
We lost them? Is it Chaplain?
Can anybody hear us? Mr. Bushell?
David Chaplain can still hear you.
Okay. All right. I might just wait for him to come back on the line. Maybe on mute, Mr. Bushell. I might throw...
My apologies, I was on mute.
Oh, that's okay.
Yes, before I answer your question, I would like to add something to Mr. Chaplin's submission. In the Air Force Association submission, you'll note that we have included continued use of the airfield for RAAF Museum Interactive Heritage Flying, Air Force Cadet Flying, Light Recreational Aviation and Vintage Aircraft, Joy Flight. I think we should add in there that we support the notion that airfield could be an important defence asset if used in the way that Mr. Chaplin suggested there.
Thank you.
Now, to turn to your question regarding the cultural significance of people in the contemporary Air Force, if they are serving at a location like Point Cook, and I served at Point Cook, initially when I first joined the Air Force as a cadet, and then I went back there to the School of Languages before I went on a posting to our nearest Asian neighbour in Jakarta. And it is a valuable, and when you are at Point Cook, you do get a feeling of the historic value of that location and those people. It was the launching place for men who went to the First World War, also the Second World War. So there is so much heritage in that location that one does feel that when one serves at Point Cook.
So would your assessment be, I mean, the site has been identified as surplus land. I think we've established that the strategic value hasn't been taken into account, but would you say that the social value hasn't been taken into account in this independent audit, identifying it as surplus land?
Yes, I would support that view.
So, what do you? I'd just like to turn to you, Mr. Chaplain. You mentioned in your submission about the Hearts and Minds program. So, can you just sort of give us a sense of what would be lost should they sell off this site for to private developers or whoever it might be that snaps it up?
Senator, in that context, I was referring to the program for developing the youth with regards to cadet aviation activities, which is a nationwide program, but we have our headquarters. When I say we, I am still involved with the Air Force Cadets at Point Cook, and in the previous 5 years I was head of operations for flying for the Air Force Cadet operations. And so we have a very large program it's widely publicised amongst the cadet system and also on the Air Force Cadets website. It is a Hearts and Minds program for developing the cadets to inspire them and motivate them towards their potential. Point Cook is a very strong base in that regard with regards to cadet flying. It's the headquarters for number 4 wing, which is the Victorian Centre for Air Force Cadets, and it's also the headquarters for our elementary flying training school with the Air Force Cadets there too. The facilities there are outstanding for flying activities, and we often get bus loads of cadets coming in on weekends or school holidays and partaking in the activities there.
Just one more on that. Yeah. Keep it on. I was just wondering, just on the point of cadets, how important is it to have a cadet facility so close to Melbourne and Geelong?
This is my view only, Senator. It's, as I say, I represent myself. But in my experience, it's very important to have a centre close by that population centre. The reason a couple-fold. The first is the cadets need to travel from their home school, their home base, their squadrons to the location. And in some instances in the past, we have flown to their location, for instance, Shepparton, Warrnambool, etc., and conducted activities there. But for the Melbourne Basin, they normally travel on the day, partake in the activities and then travel home. And they can be brought by bus or with parents, etc. Same with our volunteer staff. So they just travel on the day, arrive at the facility, conduct the operations and travel home in the same day in most cases. And so that regional location is very important. If the activity was to be permanently home somewhere else, I think you would lose that cohesion and the distance of travel would become a problem for gaining volunteer staff to do that. And also with the cadet transport may be an issue.
Mm. And Mr. Bushell, I think you said before that you joined as a cadet at Point Cook. We heard that quite a few times today, I think, and heard about the notion of the base being, the people on the base connected to the base are like a family. We heard about ashes being scattered on the parade ground, people wanting to be return there after they pass away. It's a pretty special place. So if you can both just please sum up for me what you think will be the impact of selling such a, I guess, an emotionally significant place for the serving members and for recruitment as well. Mr. Chaplin, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I have a very personal affinity for Point Cook. I joined the Air Force at age 17 and was transported in the front gate there in 1980. And here I am at 64 years old, and I'm still engaged in activities at Point Cook. Off and on, I've worked out around 25, 26 years of involvement there, and I do partake in interactive public flying of the museum airplanes there. I think, I speak for myself, but I think I reflect mostly how most Air Force people feel. It is the home of the Air Force itself. Apart from there's so much history there, the fact that we've got a cadet operation there, those cadets get to see some of this interactive flying with public flying of the heritage displays. They can go to the museum there, and as the public can as well, and view the excellent displays there at the RAF Museum. I think nearly everyone who's served in the Air Force ends up going there to see how the Air Force started and a lot of the evidence of how it developed. It's very close to most people's hearts. Of course, we understand that there are a lot of commercial pressures there, but that's just how most people would feel.
Thank you, Mr. Chaplin. Mr. Bushell, would you like to add anything?
I'll just add that the Air Force Association, as an institution, supports the view that Mr. Chaplin has expressed. And in our submission regarding terms of reference C, we made a strong point that cadets are very important to today's ADF. In a lot of cases, the cadets actually provide the uniform presence at commemorative services, for one thing, and naturally the cadets are an institution from which many people advance to join part of the ADF. So all those points that Mr. Chaplin made, we strongly support from the Air Force Association point of view, in addition to his personal contribution. And when we say cadet, there is a fine distinction there. When I said I joined the Air Force as a cadet at Point Cook, that was a full-time member of the Air Force rather than a member of the Australian the Air Force cadets of today. So that it doesn't matter. We hold those Air Force cadets to be a very important contribution to the ADF effort overall.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bushell. I'm now going to pass the call to Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks, both of you for the submissions and your appearance today. One of the issues we continue to have raised with us when we go to sites like this is the nature of the parade ground. And at Point Cook, we saw not only the parade ground, but the memorial gardens and the memorials that are around the parade ground. That seemed a pretty sort of hallowed place from what we heard. Do either of you have a view about the parade ground and what protections should be for that?
Yeah, definitely from the Air Force Association point of view. And there is mention in our submission of memorials of significance at Point Cook relevant to RAAF veterans and their families, being the Australian Flying Corps Memorial, the RAF Centenary Memorial, and the RAAF Chapel. That parade ground at Point Cook, and I would have to check the validity, but I believe that some sand from the deserts of Mesopotamia has been used on that parade ground. I remember in 1963 when I was a cadet at Point Cook, we were reviewed in a parade there by Sir Richard Williams, the man I referred to earlier as the father of the RAAF. So, you know, there was just so much history and so much feeling with that parade ground. Maybe we don't have fond memories of going on parade there, but
Probably.
yeah, there is the heritage value of it.
When you look at other countries with a proud aviation history, the UK, for example, they have preserved a whole series of their historic air bases because as air bases with airstrips and facilities, because they recognise that history is so critical to their national story. When we're talking in and around Melbourne, this is really the airbase, isn't it? This is the historical airbase that tells that story, the aviation story, the military aviation story in Melbourne, isn't it?
Well, part of our submission, and a part that perhaps I should have emphasised more strongly, is that the one thing that we are opposed to is building houses all over that airfield, because we oppose that for several reasons. One is the reason that you just mentioned of the heritage value, but also there is an environmental concern there that open space acts as a natural buffer to the adjoining migratory waterbird habitat to the east and the Point Cook Coastal Park. So we do not want to see build houses built all over that airfield. We want the airfield as an open space and preferably as an operational airfield for the purpose of heritage flying. And as Mr. Chaplin has pointed out, in the event of a defence emergency, it can be used for operational purposes as well. But we definitely don't want to see that airfield overrun by housing estates.
Yeah, and it has that, you could call it an alternate aviation history, which is going back millions of years with the Ramsar wetlands and that edge of the airfield, how it interacts with Ramsar listed wetlands. Have you seen anything in any of the documents produced by Defence that understands how sensitive that interaction is with Ramsar listed wetlands? I haven't.
I have not, and I support the submission by the National Trust of Victoria, which no doubt they will be representing later. But as they point out, we feel that the heritage professionals have not been sufficiently involved in this, and to the same extent, I guess, environmental professionals.
Yeah, it feels like it's more been driven by bean counters and real estate agents than defence, environment or heritage experts, doesn't it?
I wouldn't use those words, but yes, I agree.
All right. Thanks, both of you, for your evidence.
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. I'll pass the call to Senator Chapman.
Thanks a lot, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for appearing today. Mr Bushell, can I just ask, in terms of the submission that's been provided to the committee, on page 2, the last couple of dot points there, I just wanted to ask you your thoughts about what you had put to the committee around the divestment program process, and particularly with reference to the Torrens Parade Ground precinct in Adelaide. You go into some detail there about the case study where that site had been divested, but the divestment potentially could be used as a priority for veterans in search of new homes. And I was hoping that you might flesh that point out for the committee.
There's not a lot that I can add to what is already written in the submission. I'm in Queensland rather than South Australia, but I do know that from discussions with my colleagues in South Australia that is a valuable asset that they use there. As far as any housing that does become available, I would see it as a valuable contribution to veteran wellbeing if that housing was prioritised for veteran wellbeing.
So you'd support it provided there was tangible outcomes for veterans, is what you're saying?
I would not support small-scale estate development across that airfield, because I believe that the airfield should be preserved in its current state. However, in the wider picture of other assets that are being divested, wherever there is housing being developed, I would like to see priority given to veterans to gain some wellbeing benefits from those housing developments.
Yeah, okay. As far as I understand, I mean, a lot of this is still up for negotiations with Defence, government of the day, about if there is an interested party, what would be the outcome. And I think from what I'm understanding from your evidence, both in written and oral, is that, should the government go down the path of divesting this site, that at least there'd be a tangible outcome there for veterans who might be in search of a home, or at least accommodation for veterans and their families.
Yes, that is our view, not specifically for Point Cook, but for the wider sector across the nation where there's 60 sites to be divested. Yeah,
no, I appreciate that. I guess some of the discussions we had earlier today when we went to the site visitation, if there were assurances that government would protect the heritage of the sites, the heritage buildings, obviously the museum, and the like, and other parts of the land divested, is that something that you would still support if there were those guarantees around protections on heritage?
I think it's more than... sorry, I may be misunderstanding your question, but if it concerns housing development on the land of Point Cook, I don't think that is feasible. I think if there was housing development across that land that is now RWF Williams, Point Cook Base, we would lose the airfield for a start, which has, as well as its heritage value, it also has a defence value. And with that open space is very valuable from an environmental point of view. So I don't see how a housing development could be envisaged on that property and still retain the heritage value.
As I understood today, I think there were 2 out of the 3 units that were there were units that could easily be, transferred over down the road to Lavington, as we understood, about 7 k's away. But there was obviously one of the squadrons there would need to be relocated. Is it possible, from your point of view and experience, that they could be housed at a different airfield? Granted, it would be probably privately owned, or where the government looks at, looking at ways that they could have an arrangement with either Avalon or Tullamarine, Moorabbin, or those type of airstrips?
I'm not sure which units you may be discussing, or which operations you're discussing there, but the important facilities that are located at Point Cook, well, one of them is the RWF Museum, and I don't think that could be readily moved. The number 100 Squadron has some people there, and they need the airfield to do their flying operations. I don't. Perhaps I'm not understanding your question clearly.
I think you've just provided me with answers. I appreciate that. Mr. Chaplin, in terms of the cadets, is that something that can easily be remediated by government looking at if we were to move them? Could they be moved with ease, I guess, to a nearby airstrip that's, I guess, in this case, privately run? Or is there a bit more groundwork that would need to occur should that happen?
It's a difficult question to answer, Senator. I think there would be a lot more groundwork to be done, and it would not be my position to say that there's a solution. It's quite a complex thing regarding proximity to for travel, volunteers, airspace, facilities, security for the children effectively who are there, and supervision of them. So it's not something that can easily be moved. At places where our flying schools don't exist, for instance, outside of southern Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, then Defence uses powered service providers, so they send the cadets to commercial operators to do some flying activities, and they're supervised there by their staff. But we're talking quite large population centres here, and one of the reasons why we do operate the way we do is to provide that level of safety and standardisation across the flying activities.
Do you happen to know how many cadet units there are in the Air Force in, let's say, the state of Victoria or in Greater Melbourne?
I can't say, Senator. The Air Force Cadet website says that currently there's over 9,500 cadets in Australia. I believe in the order of 2,500 in Victoria, and a vast majority of those would be in the densely populated areas. Of course, you'd have to go back to Cadet Branch to ask those specific questions, but there are quite large numbers when you think of the size of the Air Force versus the size of the Air Force cadets. It's not a great deal of difference.
No, that's all right. We might follow that up with further questions on notice on that, but I guess my point really is trying to understand that if they were to be moved, is it something that could easily be moved and be a bit more central to where I guess most of the cadets live rather than out in Point Cook, for instance? Like, is it better to be much more closer to Melbourne, maybe using an airstrip like Moorabbin, for instance, or something closer like Tullamarine or Avalon?
I don't think I can answer that, Senator.
All good.
Yeah, I would perhaps make a comment that those airfields, Moorabbin and Tullamarine, have very high air traffic density, and the sort of operations that the cadets might do would be very difficult to incorporate into that high level of air traffic density. And further on the point of cadets, I'm located in Toowoomba, and the local Mill Bay Barracks where the cadets meet, Army, Navy and Air Force cadets meet, that's another property that is to be divested. And if those cadets don't have a meeting place that is close to where their parents are located, it makes it extremely difficult for the parents to get them to their parades. And so my feeling, and this is a personal feeling, is that divesting those sort of properties will result in a reduction in the number of cadets that are attending their parade.
Okay. So my last question to both of you is then, where can we encourage Defence to focus so that the ADF cadets get the best outcome?
Would you like to take that, David?
I'm not sure what you're asking there, Senator.
Well, what would you like us to encourage Defence to focus so that the ADF cadets that we just spoke about do get the best outcome from this divestment process? You know, what are your thoughts around how we can better support the cadets or minimise disruption?
My personal view is that it's already well managed, and the funding seems to be sufficient to allow us to do our activities. If Point Cook were to close, I believe we couldn't easily move to a place like Essendon or Moorabbin or Tullamarine. Those are very busy areas. Even places like Ballarat, too far away for people to have ready access. We would lose a lot of our volunteers. So a lot of it is the principle of proximity, having people nearby who can undertake these activities. I don't really know where else we could go. I guess my only intent is that if we could remain with an airfield at Point Cook, then we could continue to bolster those activities, even if parts of the land are sold off
Okay.
Yeah, I might add from the Air Force Association submission where we address terms of reference C, that I believe that Defence must place importance on the role of cadets in any considerations of divestment of properties, so that the interest that we have outlined here today of providing a place where those cadets can meet so that their parents feel that they are safe, and we retain the number of volunteers that we have who are associated with these cadets. So it's very important that those aspects be taken into consideration when divestment of properties, including properties that we're now talking about Point Cook, but I've broadened it a little to talk about a regional city like Toowoomba, where they are intending to divest the property, where the cadets of the three services all meet. Now, once you take that away, finding another location where those cadets can meet is going to make problems in finding volunteers, in getting the cadets to their parade. So we strongly recommend that is taken, is given priority in the Defence consideration for divestments of property.
Thanks for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bushell and Mr. Chaplin. Thank you for appearing as witnesses today. The committee would appreciate, I don't think there are questions on notice, but if there are, to please provide them by Monday the 1st of June. Okay, I now welcome the Australian National Veterans Arts Museum and the National Trust of Australia Victoria Branch. Thank you. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today?
Senator, my name is Mark Johnson. I'm the founding chairman of the Australian National Veterans Arts Museum, or ANVAM, and an unpaid volunteer of more than 13 years with ANVAM, an Australian Army veteran of over 11 years service, and approximately 15 years working in defence capability projects, including a $1.2 billion infrastructure project. And through my work with ANVAM over the past 13 years, I believe I've become somewhat of an expert in the subject matter of what we're talking about today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
Hi, Senator. I'm Colette Brennan. I'm the CEO of the National Trust of Australia Victoria.
And I'm Samantha Westbrook, and I'm the Executive Manager of Conservation Advocacy at the National Trust of Australia Victoria as well.
Thank you very much. Would anybody like to make a short opening statement?
Thank you, Chair. ANVAM's written submission with respect to 310 St Kilda Road is before the committee, and in the interest of time I'll focus on just three matters. On the audit, it stepped outside its terms of reference when recommending disposal by commercial sale, and is actually a distraction from the underlying theme of that report. Further, the Commonwealth property disposal policy does not permit sale unless a property is surplus to the Commonwealth, not just to one department. 310 St Kilda Road is in any event now confirmed as available, and the question is not whether it leaves Defence's hands, but how. On the mechanism for ANVAM accessing the site and how Defence has characterised it, our proposal is to be appointed trustee under the Section 122 of the Lands Acquisition Act. This is not a disposal. The property transfers to ANVAM via trust deed while remaining Commonwealth owned and outside the disposal policy entirely. Defence has repeatedly told ministers they cannot proceed as our proposal does not align with the disposal policy, and described our proposed use of Section 122 as not the intent of that clause. Yet in 2019, the Governor-General wrote to the Minister for Defence proposing this exact mechanism, and the Minister then responded to address only the disposal policy and not the substance of the Governor-General's letter. On funding and the merits, projects of this nature usually begin before all funding is committed. The government's $4.77 million investment in 2022 gives us an excellent foundation for our fundraising. During the audit, Defence advised the government that ANVAM's proposal has merits and is worthy of further defence consideration. Yet, despite the new evidence we provided in November 2024, the disposal by commercial sale recommendation was upheld. By any existing evaluation, ANVAM's proposal for 310 St Kilda Road is the superior option. It meets Defence's 6 evaluation criteria used to assess the audit, the government's stated requirements for this disposal, the Commonwealth Property Disposal Policy retention criteria, and the Public Governance Performance and Accountability Act's obligations. It contributes to the National Defence Strategy, the Royal Commission recommendations, and the National Cultural Policy, with economic benefits in the order of between 9 and 34 million per annum. In closing, Senator Ciccione observed in earlier hearings that organisations and trusts do a great job of protecting heritage while enabling public access. We agree. This committee has the opportunity now to ensure procedural fairness on this matter and to recommend permanent parliamentary oversight of property disposals where community interests or heritage values are at stake. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Please.
So the National Trust of Australia Victoria is the state's largest community-based heritage advocacy organisation. We manage a richly diverse portfolio of heritage places and bring significant expertise in activating these places through history, arts and creativity. Our advocacy is delivered through policy engagement, education, public programming and custodianship of our places. This divestment process has highlighted for us a fundamental issue at the federal level, a glaring absence of cultural heritage in the remit of and policies across government, not just in the Department of Defence. As a custodian of public land and places with significant heritage cultural values, the federal government has a responsibility to follow and provide leadership in best practice heritage and asset management. Not having a clear focus on Australia's cultural heritage and the valuing, management and celebration of it embedded in policy and practice is a significant gap. It is essential that this inquiry include recommendations to address this gap. The National Trust has thoroughly reviewed the Defence Estate audit. We do not oppose a reduction of the Defence Estate and believe it could generate impressive positive and impactful community benefits if managed with excellence. But there are some significant factors to consider. We found that heritage management within the Department of Defence is limited to minimum statutory compliance, not holistic and strategic. Of note, integration of better heritage management is not a barrier to effective asset management, divestment or development. When properly integrated into a portfolio-wide management system, it enhances sustainability, decision-making and long-term capability outcomes. We recommend that Defence implement significantly improved asset management processes in parallel with the divestment. The consultation sessions we have attended have demonstrated the current and ex-Defence personnel and local communities value these places deeply, care about what happens to them and want to retain existing connections. The divestment process must deliver the best heritage outcomes for these valued places to respect community and to ensure that future generations benefit from this significant tangible and intangible cultural heritage. In closing, this divestment process provides a great opportunity for Defence to set an example and show leadership in the management of Australia's heritage by focusing on controls and statutory obligations and, most significantly, by championing heritage and demonstrating how it can be shared and celebrated for the benefit of all Australians. It's time to take a nation-building view through the establishment of a Department for Heritage that will preserve and enliven Australia's heritage for now and tomorrow. The National Trust stands ready to work constructively with government and communities to improve heritage outcomes for the Defence Estate, government-owned heritage and significant heritage assets across Australia for the benefit of all Australians today and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now pass to Senator Shoebridge.
Well, thanks to both organisations for the work you do and your submissions. Ms Brennan, I admire your enthusiasm and hope, and obviously where you want this to end, which is Department of Defence respecting, leaning into and understanding the value of heritage. I fully support that. But we are confronted by a decision that's been made by the department. They called them auditors, but we found out in early in this inquiry that they didn't do an audit, it was just a review. Right. 2 reviewers signed off by the government that has seen all of these heritage assets, and then pretty much the only recommendation is sell them for maximum market value. Now, I mean, we went to Victoria Barracks today, we went to Point Cook, we went to Victoria Barracks in Sydney last a few weeks ago, we went to HMAS Penguin. You go to these heritage sites and it seems impossible that you could go and visit these heritage sites and then leave them and say, well, our primary driving directive is maximise market value. How do we get from where we are now to where you want to be?
Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate the care you're putting in visiting the places, because that's where you feel also the intangible value of them, which is very important. The places will still be sold with heritage constraints upon them, and I think as part of the divestment process, the way that these standards are maintained as expectations in any EOIs will be essential. Equally, though, going back to the inquiry, we are advocating for a response in writing. We think it would be very positive for the defence to talk about, what was the name of that, Sam? The
business improvement?
Yes, the business improvement. So we also think at the same time, concurrently, what it's flushed out are 2 big issues. One, within heritage, within the Department of Defence, heritage itself has some fantastic employees, but no holistic view. Equally, there is nowhere for Defence to say, could you also help add value to the heritage management of these places? So going back to the original point in my statement, there is actually an all-of-government issue here with the role of heritage and the way it's given a focus. Do you want to add, Sam?
So yes,
Sorry.
Senator, I'd just like to add that the audit, having thoroughly read the audit, there are a number of recommendations there about how Department of Defence can improve their portfolio management, and we'd like those to be addressed as well. So I think regardless of the flaws in the audit process, it has really fleshed out an issue in portfolio management in general. And while we might not like the idea that some of these places are going to be divested, I think it's going to be the avenue to improve Department of Defence systems now and into the future.
Once they sell off the crown jewels of the heritage estate, then they get their heritage together. That does seem a rather backwards, from my perspective, a rather backwards approach to heritage.
I agree.
Flog off the good bits and then get your heritage act together.
But they are Department of Defence. That's what we're saying. There is actually a gap in Department for Heritage. So if you wanted to divest the heritage responsibilities of certain places across government, that is another gap.
Could we come back to probably a more fundamental heritage point?
Yeah.
Which is when I've spoken with heritage experts over decades of looking at planning issues and divestment, one of the key things the heritage community will say is continuing the use of a site, continuing its historical use, maintaining and continuing that use is one of the most critical things in a heritage site. We seem to have jumped straight past that. So I might ask the trust, I mean, so let's take Victoria Barracks, more than 1,500 people there, all of it being used pretty much, all of it being used for its purpose that it was considered, high intensity use. We're told that the maintenance costs on that are barely $850,000 a year, so it's not bankrupting the Commonwealth. And we've got 1,500 people engaged in productive work in a heritage building designed for that productive work. That's a good heritage outcome, isn't it? What's happening now?
Well, we haven't been able to see or visit that place, and so we would only take it in good faith that that is no longer fit for purpose. So if you say that as fact, right, and it may not be, but clearly...
Well, I spoke with the asset manager this morning,
right,
and I said, Well, you know, are people working? Yes, 1,500 people working. Is it fit for purpose? Yes, it's providing the services needed. And we find that the maintenance cost is barely not even $900,000 a year.
Sounds like a very good project to continue working on. Perhaps that needs further investigation.
Well, perhaps if you're doing a pretend audit, which is really just a review, and you don't spend more than a day there, and you don't talk to heritage experts, you might decide to sell it. But perhaps if you spoke to the heritage experts, spoke to the people working there, looked at the heritage, you might decide to keep it.
But Senator, I also like to identify that sometimes the best custodians, purposes of buildings change, and sometimes the purpose of or the operations of a department or an organisation change, so that sometimes there's a better use for those places. And actually, so some of the places that have been identified for divestment, like the repatriation centre, have been empty for a long time, and they became redundant a number of years ago. Isn't it better that we identify that moving forward, Victoria Barracks is going to be less and less utilised by Department of Defence, and start putting in place processes to work out a better way for that building to be used?
Which is then an outcome which is not just market value and money.
But let's be clear.
But
it's
didn't
busy.
do the audit.
Well, the review.
So I think we're getting...
It's not an audit, it's a review.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Victoria Barracks in Melbourne, it's busy. It's full of 1,500 plus defence personnel. They're all working in functioning offices. They're maintaining the heritage values. If we jump to the assumption that it's going to be vacated, then we're sort of turning this whole thing on its head. Because as we were speaking to the people on site, we asked, well, where are you going to go? Where are the 1,500 people going? What's the plan? There is no plan. They might lease some office space in the city, which will almost certainly cost more than 800 grand a year. Well, they might split them up and send some here and some there. There is no plan. I think you're being generous, is what I'm suggesting. You're being generous in suggesting there's some cunning plan here.
Sorry? That there is?
There is some cunning plan, that there's some sensible plan for Victoria Barracks.
I
wouldn't jump with that generosity, given the evidence.
Well, we've just pointed out we have no specific information. We haven't been to visit it. And you're asking us to deep dive in one particular place that we think is extremely important, of national significance, that no one in the general public can actually access either.
I suppose I was asking a more simple proposition. Whether or not, from your perspective, its use, its current use, which is also consistent with the...
I don't know. I've told you. We don't know.
Maybe let me finish.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had.
I'm asking you whether its current use as a military site, which dates back with continuous use as a military site to 1860, whether or not that's a relevant and valid part of the heritage, and whether or not, from a National Trust perspective, there is benefit in maintaining the ongoing historical use if it's valid.
Yes.
Yes, there's absolutely. The significance relates to a use of a place. However...
It's one factor.
Yes, it's absolutely one factor. And there's no... a place can be divested or have other owners that retains those connections. And it's also important to have a compatible use and a use that's going to sustain the place.
Absolutely, which takes me to 310.
Great.
Have you seen 310?
We understand and work closely and support the advocacy work.
There's no heritage protections over 310, is my understanding. It's not listed, despite it being having a remarkable history from the late 1930s. It's a fabulous, I don't know, maybe it's called neo-art deco architecture, gorgeous internal spaces. Do you see a heritage case for giving it protection?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Heritage Victoria has already gone through that process, and it's got a case of being of state significance, and I understand.
You'll be able to comment on that further, because we've been supporting the advocacy work undertaken by their organisation.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, in terms of, just can we stop for a moment and consider the heritage values and why a use that reflects some of that history might be valuable?
Oh, absolutely. We have, upon coming across this building in 2013, its history was immediately obvious to us. In fact, it's the only place on the whole list of properties for divestment that was not built for the Department of Defence. It was built for the veteran community, and we can trace its connection to the veteran community back to the Sudan campaign of 1885. And so for veterans like me and some in the audience here today, that connection to those who came before us is really important.
And it's in an extraordinary precinct, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because it's got Victoria Barracks on one side, the memorial across the road. Like it has the precinct itself has value as a heritage precinct.
The St Kilda Road in front of that building and beyond across to the other side of the road and the Shrine of Remembrance is listed on the National Heritage List as a commemorative precinct. And so this place was built for the living, the survivors of war, to offer that connection to that place is very important.
When you look at the audit/review, however you want to describe it, and you see the decision, what seems to amount to decision making on, say, Victoria Barracks and 310 St Kilda Road, do you want to explain to me, as someone who's been engaged on the properties, how you view that decision making?
On the audit itself, I've done a deep dive myself into that and have been quite concerned of the language in the audit. And frankly, this discussion about the divestment is a smokescreen to the underlying issues in the audit about the accumulation of power within authority within the Department of Defence around their opportunity to put heritage to one side. When I say heritage, to put the Department of Climate Change and Environment out of the picture, to put Department of Finance out of the picture, so the whole management of the estate will be insourced to within the Department of Defence.
And as you point out, they jump straight to sale to maximise financial return when the divestment strategy and policies for the government say, well, you first should look at alternate uses for a public purpose.
Yes, and that's exactly what we've been offering.
Yeah.
We spoke to the one member of the audit, provided some details about what we proposed and why, and we've since provided submissions to the government, providing further evidence based on the National Defence Strategy, the Royal Commission and other reports that have come out since, showing the evidence of why our proposed use contributes to the National Defence Strategy, the wellbeing of veterans, the national cultural policy and other government priorities.
Consistent with the policy. Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator Shoebridge. I'll pass the call to Senator Ciccone.
Thanks a lot, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for appearing today. Look, I just wanted to ask, in terms of the National Heritage listing, what does that mean in practical terms, in terms of the protection of, let's say, Point Cook or Victoria Barracks, where we were today? Acknowledging you weren't there at both, but as a committee we were.
Do you want to do that description?
Yes, so that's it means it's listed at a national level, and it's protected by the EPBC Act, and that changes that are made to those places need to go through the processes as dictated by the EPBC Act.
So Point Cook, as we know, has already opened the museum there, but not everyone can just turn up. I think, as we understood today, it's open 2 days a week, but you've got to pre-register, etc. Will that then allow the community to have greater access rather than just 2 days a week, be able to access these sites?
Well, it depends on the model.
Yeah.
So it may even be naive thinking that these can be sold for profit, then let alone the ongoing costs to manage their heritage requirements. The divestment of something of such high heritage standards will put a lot of limits on, for example, adaptive reuse, development, etc., in and around these sites. So that's what we.
So the new owner, let's say, new owner, would they still own these sites, or would they own the sites that are heritage listed, or does the Commonwealth still have?
No, they own them, but they have to adhere to the standards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And in terms of those standards, that means that they have to protect the heritage that's contained not just on the building itself, but what's inside.
And also even interpretation as well. So telling the stories, continuing the storytelling of those places. So interpretation.
I know you mentioned just before with Senator Shoebridge's line of questions about Vic Barracks. I mean, have you ever been inside the war cabinet room?
No. We'd love to.
And to be honest, I think most people listening here or here have not. But, we've been fortunate enough today to visit that room. And in fact, it's a shame that room is currently not open to the public. I mean, that's the Cabinet room where Cabinet met to discuss our involvement in world wars. And it is a great shame that is not open. And I think, it's that type of heritage that we need to tell future generations, whether it's supporting veterans, through an arts museum, or telling the story about what had occurred, both within government and external, I think is so important. And I think if the government does proceed with the Victorian Barracks divestment, is that then an area where your organisation comes into play? I'm just trying to understand where does National Trust of Australia
we could be part of it. So we, in our response, we noted that expert advice could be committees forming, working groups. You might have particular target areas where you need heritage expertise on a particular site, even in the shape-up of what the offer is, right through to eventual linking to community. That's what we do every day. But we are not for profit.
Yeah. Mr. Johnson, did you want to just
Senator,
you're keen to ask?
Just on your point of access to places like the War Cabinet rooms, prior to COVID, through Victoria Barracks, they did run a regular tour, and taking into account the security requirements nowadays, they could still do that. So there's many ways to skin a cat, and selling it is not just the only way to get access to.
Yeah, I mean, when we compared to Vic Barracks in Sydney, I mean, the Chair and I and Senator Shoebridge were also very lucky enough to visit. It sounded like they had much more regular openings than the Vic Barracks here, let's say, in Melbourne. But the War Cabinet Room obviously is something that, not everyone gets to have an ability to go. It's not advertised. I mean, if we're not doing these tours, then there's no way of people actually learning about the history of the building.
Well, they've stopped those tours since COVID.
Yes.
But it would be a question to Defence. What would it take to get a tour like that up and running? That would be potentially a quick win. There are security requirements in and around Victoria Barracks here, but hosted tours are potentially possible.
But it reinforces the gap in Defence currently.
Yes.
Defence has a particular purpose, so who in government holds the responsibility for heritage?
So in terms of their heritage experience, it's quite low.
And even the objectives of their department. So if we're saying this actually points to one of the big issues, that because there's assets across government that would equally have this issue.
So I just note on page 3 of your submission, you talk about some of the critical issues that require action.
Yeah.
Obviously, lack of internal heritage experience,
Yeah.
consistent application of heritage and asset best practice,
Yeah.
under-resourcing of heritage assets and asset maintenance and management, failure to act on long-standing concerns raised in previous reports and stakeholders, and poor management of collections and movable heritage. It says to me that, Defence, as great of a job they do in holding onto these assets, aren't really doing enough in terms of maintaining that heritage, but also part of the storytelling, I guess. And look, Vic Barracks is one example. There's many other examples where the committee, no doubt, has received or continued to receive information about the lack of storytelling that we should be doing to the community, so people can actually educate and learn themselves about our proud history.
I think there's never been a more critical time in an age of misinformation, algorithms, distortion, discussions of even what is Australian identity. These places actually are critical, and that's why there's a gap to be addressed.
So what was the business process improvement recommendations that you found in the Defence audit that you strongly supported? Why was that?
No, what we're saying is that we should see published responses from Department of Defence to those.
So the responses to the key recommendations at the start of the report.
Is that business process improvement for instance?
Yeah, there's a whole list of them. So you've identified them. So then the response to them.
Yeah, so in the audit report, they had a response from government relating to the key recommendations at the start of the report.
Got you.
And then they had these business improvement recommendations at the bottom of the report, which were amazing, about improving Defence asset management. And there was not a response asked from Department of Defence on those. So we are asking for a response on those because there were some really good ones in there.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I must have misinterpreted your submission. I'm just mindful we've just slightly over time. I might just say the chair wanted to jump in and ask her questions too.
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. I just probably because those were outside the terms of reference. So they admitted in the report that the business improvement stuff was actually nothing, absolutely nothing to do with this review of the defence estate. And I just wanted to get your views, I guess, on these 2 points about the community access, to the point about the security. This is a working defence base, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are security risks with having people on the base constantly coming through. Yes. That's right? Yep. Okay. Although the connection to community is absolutely important. On the point of heritage, would you agree that defence would be the best stewards of their own military history?
No, we believe that there is a need, as we said in our opening statement, for the for the federal government to note the gap across government in heritage, because you have one area of government that's about statutory but only related to national heritage listed places. The Office for the Arts does a few little programs about movable, intangible heritage, but there is no leadership. So there is an option for Defence to set up a heritage team unit within their department, for sure.
But in terms of, the military having its own living memory,
yes,
we saw that at all the bases that we were at today, living on site, being there, surely is the best way to preserve and continue and maintain that living. Okay, good. All right. So I just want to, Mr. Johnson, ask you a few questions about the audit report. So, they've obviously identified that these sites to sell off are surplus and that they're not fit for purpose, because these are the definitions that they have created. Now, I'm struggling to reconcile, seeing something like Point Cook this morning that is strategic, it's used, it's part of the community, it's location proximity, it's access to air, land and sea. All those things are incredibly important, and I would have thought for the ADF that it was fit for purpose in terms of their role of defending Australia. So if you can just comment on that idea of, that this independent audit is resting on these two concepts of this is surplus land and this is not fit for purpose, please.
The terms of reference excluded an important part of the Defence Strategic Review, which was the southern basing. That is mentioned in passing in the report. It's not mentioned in the terms of reference, and they did not give it any consideration that I could read at all. So the southern basing dimension to this, and most of the sites recommended for divestment in the south of Australia, and yet they have overlooked completely the strategic value in the context of the Defence Strategic Review of why that southern basing is important.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to, you've had a tough time with the government over more than a decade about procedural fairness and effectively decisions made even though you're going through these processes. Can you just, I guess, reflect for us about the lessons that are learned about, sites that are earmarked for transfer or divestment without actually having a plan to do that, or having made up your mind before going through any of this procedure?
As you say, Senator, I've been on this journey for 13 years now, and when we came to the Department of Defence, in fact at the department's own invitation to consider what we could come up with as a proposal for that particular building we are talking about, we came back with a proposal that ticks a lot of boxes, contributes to the ADF particularly and Defence, and we work with people within Victoria Barracks to support their wellbeing as well. The veteran community and the broader community in the context of the audit report and the government's promotion of that, we do contribute to defence. We do preserve the heritage, in fact enhance it, and for us heritage is an asset, not a liability to be managed, and we're open to the public. Now, we made a submission to the Department of Finance when they were doing the review of the Lands Acquisition Act in 2020, and despite its flaws, the Commonwealth Property Disposal Policy does have some valuable concepts in there around alternative use proposals. So ours has effectively been an alternative use proposal for the last 13 years, and we see in the audit language like this at paragraph 5.34. There has also been a lack of political will to proceed with property disposals due to interest groups making representations on alternative use cases. I am offended by that, and I think my team that I have here today should be offended by that, and every other organisation that has been making representations for what they think is a valuable community use of these sites should also be offended. We've tabled with you an amended version, I think, of what is figure 5.2 in the report, and the Department of Finance has this proposal, and it basically separates the financial outcomes, which is the Commonwealth Property Disposal Policies framework, essentially, from the social and political outcomes of that yourselves as politicians representing communities should be concerned about. That we, the community, through you, the political class, are being excluded by this process where we have an interest in these places that are of value to us in one way or another. So the Commonwealth Property Disposal Framework should be amended to bring into it concepts like the Land Acquisition Act, Section 122, the Public Governance Performance and Accountability Act, where government could gift or grant property, and the concept of heritage should be better protected and considered, and in fact there should be a standing parliamentary oversight process for disposal of Commonwealth property, or proposed disposal of Commonwealth property, where there is community interest and or heritage is involved.
Would you mind if we add to that, because we on page 4 noted that as well, that the audit spoke very negatively of community groups, ex-defence personnel, volunteers, all the people involved in these places, their legacy, their future. And we also recommended that the knowledge and commitment of these groups was positioned positively. It needs to be seen as an incredible asset. They need to be recognised, respected and absolutely integrated into the framework.
Yeah, the audit, it reads like all of these key parts of the broader defence community, they're all like a burden or a cost or
a scapegoat,
a nuisance, totally undervaluing them all. Yeah, and I understand your sense of insult, Mark.
Yeah.
And yeah, perfectly do.
Well, I do this in part for myself because I get a lot out of working with members of the veteran community to see them thrive through the work that we do. But I do this as a volunteer. I'm now semi-retired. I could walk away, but I won't, because this is so important to the veteran community. In fact, this place is considered sacred by the veteran community. We are working on a nomination for National Heritage Listing because there is no place on the National Heritage List that represents the repatriation system that did all the heavy lifting in the last century through to now to look after the ex-serving community.
We got a little insight into it today. We had a little tour into it. And I can tell you, for me, I think one of the reasons why Defence don't want people going in there is you get that sense when you're in there. The extraordinary built environment, the history, the layers of history. You know, no wonder they don't want people looking at it. They might be advocates for saving it.
Careful, Senator, you will bring me to tears when you start talking about that. It is an incredible place.
Yeah.
Can you just, Mr Johnson, just talk a little bit about what would be the impact on the veteran community if they sold that to private developers? Yeah.
With heritage listing, though, by the way. clear.
Senator, let's be careful
There's
about
Heritage
heritage.
otherwise. There's heritage.
we heard today that
Doesn't-
there's no heritage.
There's plenty on the VIC barracks.
No, we're talking about 301
Okay, sorry, my
or
apologies.
310.
Yeah.
In relation to heritage, Senator, if I may, the dimension of heritage that has been overlooked in this site in relation to the Victorian Barracks Commonwealth Heritage listing is what we call Criterion G, which is social heritage. And this goes to your question, Senator Shoebridge, is that Heritage Victoria recognised that dimension to it, and that's not, and my colleague sitting next to me will be able to confirm this, but it's not about the built environment, it's about the place. And if that place is not available to us, but it hasn't been available for a long time, but if it's sold, and the hope that we have to get in there one day as a community is stripped away from us, that will be devastating, frankly.
So yes, it's the intangible values, the connections that will be lost.
Which
through...
links to Senator Shoebridge's point about continuity as well.
We've seen there's quite a few sites across Australia. North Ed School of Artillery. You've mentioned in your submission about Maribyrnong Defence Site,
Yep.
and we've seen it with your site as well, 310. You know, it screams of this. You know, there is no plan B. Exit from it. Let it go to rot. Don't live in it. Don't preserve that living memory. Don't use it for what it was designed for the people that it was designed for. Do you see any kind of assurances from the government or in this report that that won't happen to somewhere like Victoria Barracks or any of these sites that are up for sale?
The heritage protections to sites, there is I suppose, a level of facadism where you keep just the facade, the front of the building. We see a lot of that around Victoria, around Melbourne in particular. The National Trust of Australia in Victoria do a great job in protecting the whole building. But then there's the community connection to these places as well. And I think you've seen in your tours around, Senator, the community connection. You've spoken about parade grounds. I can imagine, my background is in Army, there would be regimental sergeant majors turning in their graves at the thought of some of these sites being divested because they are so near and dear to the service community and the veteran, in our case, the veteran community.
So, Senator, I'd also add that if that can only happen if the Department of Defence do their thorough, holistic heritage work looking at all values, not just national, Commonwealth, but state and local values. We've got these places that have incredible importance to local communities as well, and that's where our communities, our former defence communities and the defence communities living around them are really connected to these places. So it's a holistic assessment and acknowledgement of all values, intangible as well, collections, that needs to be very thorough for this to be, for if any divestment occurs, for that to be protected into the future, regardless of who their owner is.
And enlivened.
Yes.
It's not dead, you know, it's ongoing, as you say. Continuity should be the aim.
In our case, Senator, this place was built for the well-being of the veteran community.
Yeah.
If it is sold, to Senator Choney's question, a line will be ruled through that in terms of taking heritage forward. Yeah. If it is offered to the veteran community, and in our case to ANVAM on behalf of the veteran community, then the heritage, its history will continue into the future, and we'll be able to build on that. And that perspective should not be lost.
Understood.
But does it maximise market value, Mr. Johnson?
We have put forward in our proposal, Senator, that for it to be used as per our proposal, the economic benefit to government and the community and defence will be far and exceed a one-off receipt. It will be an annuity each year that will only grow, and will be contributing to our national defence capability through people, ADF, and through the veteran community and keeping veterans well.
Which just points out, I think, one thing you made clear in your submission and again today. This audit, so-called audit, went well beyond its brief by saying the one question we should be asking about all these sites is how to maximise market value. That is such a betrayal of the sort of custodian job, responsibility that a federal government should have. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
Thank you. We do have to end it there. I'm afraid we are over time. Thank you very much for appearing as witnesses today. I don't believe there are any questions on notice, but if they are, could you please return them to the committee by Monday the 1st of June. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I now welcome the Aviation Historical Society of Australia, Victoria Branch, and the Werribee District Historical Society.
Hello.
Mr. Prosser, can you hear us today?
Yes, I can. David Prosser speaking from the Aviation Historical Society.
Thank you very much. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today? Mr.
Yes,
Prosser,
certainly, ma'am. Certainly. My name is David Lawrence Prosser, and I am the President of the Aviation Historical Society, commonly known as the AHSA.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Heinrichs.
My name is Lisa Heinrichs. I am President of Werribee District Historical Society.
Thank you very much. I now invite you to make short opening remarks, and at the conclusion, I'll pass the senators for questions.
Distinguished Senators, committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Lisa Heinrichs, and I am before you as the President of the Werribee District Historical Society. I am here to urge this committee in the strongest possible terms to reject any piecemeal divestment of RAAF Base Point Cook. To slice up Point Cook is to sever the living tissue of a shared history. For over a century, the story of this base and the story of the Wyndham and Werribee communities have not merely run parallel, they are inextricably entwined. A thriving shared community, from its foundational growth after World War I, Point Cook was never an isolated military outpost. It was a community hub. In the 1920s, buildings like the Williamstown Naval Hall were physically relocated to the base, morphing over decades from a recreation hall to a gymnasium, a photography school, and a wartime cinema. Local families from Werribee and Werribee South grew up using these very amenities. Crucially, the base accommodated the local farming community by hosting a state primary school on Commonwealth land, a unique arrangement that laid the groundwork for today's Point Cook College. Our youth played cricket and held swimming and diving competitions against the base personnel at Bungee's Hole, raising funds together for local landmarks like the Diggers Road Memorial Hall. The social fabric deepened after World War II. Point Cook became a self-sustaining township equipped with a post office, a bank, and a hospital that rivalled Werribee's own, often utilised by the Wyndham community, with RAF doctors holding consulting rooms in town. It was a place of profound civic generosity. Every Christmas, the base threw its gates open. In 1948, they hosted a gala day for 200 children of deceased airmen, flying Father Christmas in on an Air Force Dakota. In 1952, 6'10" aircraftman A.C. Kane acted as Deputy Santa, handing out toys handmade by the Air Force Women's Association to 150 local orphans. The base's national significance was cemented in March 1954 when 8,000 personnel and local residents gathered on site to welcome Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh during their historic visit. Conclusion, a path forward. While security upgrades post 9/11 unfortunately restricted public access to favourite pastimes like fishing from the jetty or attending the Beating the Retreat ceremonies, the physical integrity of the site remains vital. Point Cook is a singular living monument to Australian military and civic cooperation. If you fragment this land, you dilute the history and lose the context of how a community and the RAF raised each other. To ensure this heritage is not lost to short-sighted development, the Werribee District Historical Society stands in full resolute support of the submission made for a community trust to take over the base. A community trust offers a visionary framework, one that protects the entirety of the site, honours its unparalleled legacy and returns the historic asset to the people who built it alongside the RAF. On behalf of the Historical Society, I ask that you reject piecemeal commercialisation, endorse the Community Trust model and preserve RAF-based Point Cook as a whole, living history for generations to come. Documented evidence of the heritage is extensive and too much to provide for today, but the Historical Society is happy to provide this electronically. This is just a brief description of part of the social history, and if required, a more extensive, in-depth history can be provided on request where there are no time restraints. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Prosser, would you like to make a quick opening statement?
Yes, I would. I appreciate there's only a short time. I'm the president of the Aviation Historical Society, and we have a keen interest in wanting to see Point Cook preserved as a community trust. And the historical importance of Point Cook to the aviation heritage, not just military aviation heritage, but also to the civil aviation heritage. And it was in the 1920s and 1930s that the then department was looking at encouraging and administering the civil aviation as we know it today. Australia's most important aviation heritage site, Australia's oldest airbase, surviving World War I hangars and buildings, site of many important aviation firsts, and home of the RAAF Museum. In fact, it should be expanded beyond what it is now. The site is the only ADF site on the National Heritage List, and indeed is one of only 106 historic sites in Australia deemed to be of national significance. And Point Cook was placed on the National Heritage Listing in 2007. The outcome of most appropriate outcome for Point Cook is to be transferred to a public community trust to preserve, operate and sympathetically develop it for heritage tourism. And there was a strong community for such an outcome in a petition tabled in 1998 by Julia Gillard, former Prime Minister at one stage, and that contained 11,000 ink signatures. The outcome is similar to the 9 historic former ADF sites given to the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust in 2001. These were former ADF naval sites with waterfront views and access, hence obvious significant land value for private development. But in that case, the government recognised the need to preserve such a significant national heritage, and the government should do the same for Point Cook now. Last thing is a brief introduction. Sydney is the home of Australia's national maritime heritage. It's a federally funded it's the Australian National Maritime Museum and the preserved Navy heritage sites of the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust. Melbourne is the home of Australia's aviation heritage, but a national aviation museum proposed in 1975 never materialised. Government can at least ensure most important heritage sites is preserved, being Point Cook, of course, and synthetically developed for heritage tourism. Thank you. Well,
thank you very much, Mr. Prosser. I'll just pass to Senator Shoebridge.
thanks both for your submissions. Ms Heinrichs, I love your submission. It's dot pointed and clear and sets it out over 2.5 pages. I really appreciate the work you put into providing that nice, succinct submission. And to you too, Mr Prosser, both of you sort of cut to the chase in your submissions, and I really appreciate it. Could I ask first of all about the natural heritage on Point Cook?
Yes.
You said that the community used to have access to the wharf, and I suppose then a connection through to the wetlands. Is that what used to happen?
Yes, that's correct. I don't know how well aware people are of the base and the geography of the Wyndham area. It sits on basalt plains, essentially. The actual airfield itself sits below sea level. So the ecosystem along there is quite spectacular. It sits in between, it's a Ramsar site, but just down the road, so to speak, is the Western Metropolitan Treatment Farm that has bird life second only to Kakadu in the world. That is part of that shoreline. I myself, as a child, would go with my grandfather fishing off the jetty or pier that is down at the base there. It was public access. It was a working Air Force base that welcomed community in all aspects, especially environmental. I took my own kids down there for barbecues and picnics. We'd sit and watch the planes or sit down by the water. You could stroll along the shore down to the Point Cook Coastal Park, which is a designated environmental area, and then just a little bit further down from that, you've actually got, your bird sanctuary and the Point Cook homestead.
So whatever happens to the site, looking at it as part of that broader ecological connection, ensuring, if we can, public access to that foreshore site and treating those environmental values as sort of non-negotiable. That's part of what I read from your submission.
Yes.
And not forgetting about them.
No, we can't forget about them, no. We can't also, and, I did not go into, the detail would have been too much. I didn't want to bring 100 pages in here as my submission. The Indigenous history of that area, that was prolific, that there was a thriving community of Indigenous people there along that foreshore at one stage.
And I've heard reports of burial sites and midden mounds and the like.
Yes.
What does your society know about that First Nations history?
We do have a fair bit on First Nations history in the museum, not anywhere near enough. I have talked to local elders. I'm trying to encourage them to come and give a visual, a video to explain the local Indigenous history. Hopefully that we can have people come and watch in the museum.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Prosser, you point out something that I wasn't aware of, which was that 20 years ago when this process had happened earlier, that one of the proposals from the federal government was that it be divested into a trust as a heritage tourism site. Do you want to?
That's correct.
Can you talk us through what the proposal then was?
Well, the proposal back in 1998 was a petition presented to Gloria Gillard, who, as you're aware, was Prime Minister at one point in time, and there were 11,000 signatures. And the idea was at that time to have Point Cook transferred to a public community trust to preserve, operate and sympathetically develop its heritage tourism. And just expanding on that, in years gone by, it was quite a humming place in terms of the museum and the civilian population of Melbourne would go to Point Cook. They had barbecues, tables, places there for people to sit, enjoy, and see the aviation that was going on. But in more recent years, that's closed down, and you have to, at this point in time, have to have a security checkpoint where you have to go through that to get into the base. And of course, a lot of cases you have to justify your existence literally as to what you're going to do or why you're there, even to go to the museum. Now, I've never heard that with any other museum in the world, and I've been to quite a few. And the end result is that it should be, as I say, freed up and made a public community trust to preserve, operate, and look after the heritage and tourism aspect of Point Cook, in addition to other things as well.
Ms Heinrichs, what do you make of the proposal to make it a public trust and perhaps within that trust, retain the natural values of it, retain the heritage values of it and open up public access?
You'll note in my submission I initially said that I'd like to see it in state hands, because that was, at the time when I wrote my submission, the only way I could think of keeping it as a whole and protecting the whole heritage, the environmental, the physical buildings and the social heritage, as I've explained in my submission. They can't be separated. You can't separate those issues out on their own. They combine as a whole. And so my only thought was that maybe in the hands of, say, Heritage Victoria. My concern with that being, though, we currently are looking at what I can only describe as willful neglect just down the road from the RAF base with Point Cook Homestead. It's been empty for years. There's been meetings with state MPs, with Heritage Victoria, and they keep saying they have no money. So when I saw the submission about the community trust, I think that would be a much better option.
And retaining the Defence Museum there, run as a Defence Museum with the support of Defence.
It can still be operational for the cadets. Preserving the heritage buildings, the heritage environment, the heritage space as a whole, but also having it accessible to the community, to maybe further expand the heritage museum there, and to still have the airfield operational, the cadets there, maybe something like, in the future it could be expanded to scouting groups and cubs. I mean, we are constantly talking about our disengaged youth. I'm sure that there is a space for programs on that base that help. I'm not saying join them up as cadets, but there may be a high ropes course or etc.
Do you, if it went into a community trust, do you see any opportunity for commercialising some of the site in order to gain the income to keep a self-sustaining trust happening on site?
Absolutely. The only section I could see as being able to sustain that would be the you had your visit there today on the outskirts of the base. You'll notice that there is green space as you enter to your right, going down the side of the base to the side access off Aviation Road there. That used to be housing, 1980s housing. I actually helped run aerotots on the base in the 1990s. As a civilian, I took my child to playgroup at the base. And that's what I'm trying to explain in my submission. The community and the base are intertwined. But the housing was being talked about being sold off back then. So this isn't something new from the federal government. But that area there, which doesn't have an intrinsic heritage value where those housing were, it may be accommodation, with shops and maybe a cinema to replace the old one that, the community can utilise.
Mr. Prosser, what if it wasn't going to stay within the defence estate, it was being put into a trust, would you see the possibility of some commercial development on there to provide an income for the trust to become self-sustaining as one way forward?
Well, I can in more ways than one, but one is that you have the RMIT University Flight School at the base, and they've been there for some time. And if they were, leave it out of Point Cook and maybe shuffled across to Melbourne Airport, well, they would have a problem because there's not sufficient space for the RMIT University Flight School at Melbourne Airport. The other aspect is there that the Air Force right now has a problem. And that is it just can't get enough new recruits So in each state, the Air Force has a group of aircraft which they use for literally, I call it, use the word joyrides, but basic training for in civilian registered aircraft for potential cadets with the view that they will further go on from there to become Air Force personnel. And that's very important because we right now have an issue with we've been involved in 6 major wars and a few skirmishes along the way, and we just don't have enough military personnel, Army, Navy, and Air Force. And it's vital that they are trained and encouraged to have more recruits going into the armed forces. And I see that Point Cook was still the ideal place for that, and that if it was in a trust environment, the costing or the charges applied to those organisations would go into the trust to help maintain the base as it is at present time and expand further. That also applies, we'd see more people going to the museum, which is world class. I've been to multiple museums, Air Force museums or civilian museums overseas, and we have a world-class museum at Point Cook. But it can be also expanded, and there's been many proposals on overcovers, new hangars and other things, but they haven't come around. And right now, I use the words that the museum is, I hate to say it, but it's not getting the number of people in there that it should or could. So from that point of view, even if there was a minor charge to go in, perhaps, but certainly there's potential for development. Money is going into the trust to expand the place and look after it with the view that it would be a trust, a community trust, and that it would be looked after accordingly.
Now, when former Prime Minister Julia Gillard championed the protection of this and it to go into a public trust, I assume she was doing that in her capacity as a member for lay law, because this is in lay law, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. She wasn't the Prime Minister at that point in time, of course.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't believe it actually is in lay law. It's actually Lawler. So.
Oh, sorry, Lawler. Yeah.
But I don't believe it. I think the boundaries have moved last federal election. So.
But you could throw a rock into
stone
it.
and hit it.
Yeah.
It was in her electorate at the
Yeah.
time. Yes.
What about the current members? Have they gone in and done the same to try and protect the public here?
So.
I'm not aware of that at this point in time.
Has said anything?
Joanne, I don't know if Joanne Ryan said anything publicly. She's the member for Lawler. I think it's Tim Watts that may be the member for Gellibrand in that area. I believe himself and Matt Hilakari, the state MP, both came out and said that when housing went in, they would make sure that the infrastructure was there to support it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you feel supported by that?
No, not at all. And anyone going into Point Cook, it's the largest suburb in Wyndham. It's it severely lacks infrastructure. That's going to get worse quite soon with aviation fields development going in next door to the RAF base, and that's why in my submission I've mentioned is the green lung. It's the green lung that separates this high density housing with from the base.
And it's got those
from the ecosystem.
It's got those majestic plantings of more than century-old tree lines as well, right throughout. It would be an extraordinary piece of parkland for the surrounding development, wouldn't it?
We in Wyndham have seen way too much removal of trees. We have a very poor tree canopy. Trees making way for development and then new plantings going in. Century-old trees, avenues of honour. The Calder Memorial, we have 80 trees left out of 10,000. that destruction can't be replaced. Once it's gone, it's gone. And, you know, you can put up as many photographs as you want. It doesn't bring it back.
I might pass the call to myself now, Senator Shoebridge, and follow on with that. I want to thank you both for your submissions, and Ms. Heinrich, if I'm pronouncing that correct. I just want to read out a few of the quotes, the messages that you've put in your submission, because having heard what you just said now about the local members saying when this is sold for housing, it is a complete jolt to the system.
It is. It's actually really hurtful. The community is hurt by statements like that.
I'm hurt. My first visit to the site today, and having seen what I've seen, it is magical, it is historical, it is significant, and even just cutting down one tree there would be a complete affront. And I just want to read out a few of the things that you said, and I quote, "The hangars, the parade ground, the commander's house and the sergeant's mess are not just bricks and mortar, they are the vessels for the stories of those who have lived and died there."
Yes.
I felt that today.
Did you visit the site where the plane crashed? People have died on base there, training.
They didn't.
Let alone going off to war at the ages of 17, 18, you know, to fight for their country. There's some that didn't make it out of that training ground.
And yet that's probably where they've earmarked for the housing development.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So they want to put a house in a place where our servicemen have died.
Yes. Their ashes are on that parade ground. That parade ground is, you would have felt the presence there while you were there. I've attended a dawn service there. I'm privileged to have been able to attend dawn service there. And the overwhelming sense of responsibility for having to preserve that, just being there, there is no way known you can entertain the fact of, you know, a Coles sitting opposite that with townhouses. You just can't do it.
The ashes spread, what is it? You know,
across the sands?
Yes. Yeah, every year, I believe.
Multiple times.
Multiple times, yeah. So something else that you said, and I quote, "To preserve the buildings without acknowledging the human experience, the training of personnel who fought for our country, or the service of the RAF, is to preserve a shell without a soul." I think that's pretty powerful. And as you just alluded to, Point Cook is the hallowed ground where personnel were trained to fight and die for our country. I just want to thank you so much for putting the significance of the site in those terms.
Thank you.
Because you've captured it beautifully. And this is what they're trying to sell off. This is what they're trying to put houses on.
If they had done more than being involved in heritage and the protection of heritage, I've seen more than my fair share of desktop reviews, we call them.
Yes.
They're supposedly heritage studies and audits that go, but someone sits there behind a laptop in an office and they look up, you know, things they can find online, and then they write a review on it. They get paid lots of money to do so. They don't experience and they don't understand what they're writing about.
Well, we established that at the hearing in Canberra, that yes, this was a desktop review. You are absolutely right. I just one final, and I'll pass over to you in a second, Mr. Prosser. But one final question for you is that you know, when the Defence Minister announced what they were going to do, the sell-off, in a social media post, he said that these operational defence bases were inaccessible by the community, and that was one of the reasons for selling them. But you've said in your submission that Point Cook Base and at Point Cook Base, the military and the community grew as one. So can you just explain that a little bit further?
So Werribee was a small town, a small unique town with three major, we had the sewage farm, where people lived and worked on the sewage farm. We utilised their swimming pool down there. I rode my own bike down there, and you would swim on the sewage farm. You would go and watch a game of football. They had their own footy team. They had their own community of Cockorock, schools, post offices, etc. The RAF base developed the same way. It was the township and the sewage farm, the RAF base and the research farm, the other one, 3 examples of living and working with the community. We would go to the cinemas on the RAF base. There was no cinema in Werribee, so you would go to the movies at the RAF base. I was taken as a child by my parents to see RAF doctors who were down the road from us because they served the community in town. They had their own consulting suites. Sometimes you would be taken to the RAF hospital because it was better equipped than our very own district hospital. Sporting activities, to cinema productions as in theatre, public dances, the community and the RAF, it grew together and expanded together. I went to a primary school. I went to a primary school where we had RAF kids. I went to school with RAF kids because the RAF had built housing in that area, as they did in multiple suburbs across the western suburbs. The commission houses that we know existed were originally RAF housing, so they weren't built for the commission. They were built for the RAF and then taken over by the commission. So you went to kids that, to school with kids that might have been there for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, however long their postings were. But they became part of that school community, and their families became part of the township, the community. And I can't imagine how hard it must have been for families to have to move so often. But the community itself always made them welcome, and they welcomed us the same way.
Okay. Thank you so much. And
if I can,
Mr. Prosser?
Yeah, it's something that Lisa just touched on a few minutes ago, and that was that with bulk housing development on the base, if that ever happened, the road from the Point Cook base as we know it now to the highway is a very narrow road, and to accommodate a whole lot more citizens driving cars up and down that road would be not a driveway, it would be a parking bay, because there would be just so many cars on a very, very narrow road going quite some distance. So from that point of view, it would cost millions, literally millions, to obtain land and or expand the roadway from the base to the highway. I believe the highway junction is having some sort of redevelop on it as we talk now. But I can see that there would be a lot of money have to be spent to someone's money to expand the road if it was ever widened at all.
Yeah, well, I think they've only thought as far as selling off the money at this stage. But just one final question, because we are very behind time here. Can I just confirm that neither of you were consulted on the historical significance of the site in connection with the community, or of the preservation of the history there?
No, we had no comment, no contact until it was announced that there was going to be divestment. I was shocked. For instance, if they had have come to us, we could have provided so much to them. Yesterday, I had someone come into the museum who's a regular visitor to the museum, and his grandfather was the pioneer of aviation photography out of Point Cook. He was honoured by the King in the 1950s for his setup of a camera on a biplane. We have that much aerial photography photographs at the museum, and you can see its actual growth from this small little section right on the coast during World War I to to the 2000s.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you very much for appearing as witnesses today. We very much appreciate your testimony and evidence. And if you were asked any questions on notice, could you please return them to committee by the Monday, the 1st of June. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Dave Prosser, goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Prosser. Okay, I now welcome Lieutenant General Kenneth James Gillespie, retired. Are you on the line?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to the Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Yes, my name is Kenneth James Gillespie. I like to be known as Ken. I'm a retired Lieutenant General. My last job in the military was Chief of the Army, and before that I was Vice Chief of the Defence Force. Since leaving the Defence Organisation, I've followed a commercial pursuit and consultancies, company directorships, work with companies like Airbus Asia Pacific and Naval Group Australia, as well as I was the chairman of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute for a number of years.
Excellent. Would you like to make a short opening statement today?
The only thing that I'd like to say is I'm clearly on public record. I've been receiving press interest up here on my view that the disposal of Victoria Barracks in Sydney hasn't been thought through very well, and that there are major strategic implications of losing the barracks that haven't been addressed nor answered in any of the responses we've seen to date.
Thank you very much. Ken, would you like to start? Or you want? Okay, got my questions?
I have questions.
Okay,
Just
that's
give me
right.
a sec.
Okay, yes, this one. So the Defence Estate Order report does not explain how they've decided which parts are surplus land, but yet they've identified that there is surplus land that is no longer fit for purpose. So if you could just, I mean, you obviously had, you know, the top experience that you could have had in the Army and Defence Force, Ken. Can you just explain to me, in your experience, what methodology would military leaders generally use to assess the strategic value of a base? And do you think that in this audit this has happened here?
No, I don't think it's happened here. I think this is an economic exercise rather than thinking through strategically about, in this case, Victoria Barracks, about a base that has a very significant historical value, heritage value to the place. But the point that I'm really concerned about is that Victoria Barracks has been for many years at the heart of our planned domestic response activities for terrorism and security issues in the heart of the Sydney CBD and along the harbour. And the divestment of the barracks does nothing to address how we would handle that very important issue going forward. So we're looking to divest the land, but we haven't yet understood the implications of the loss of that land for hopefully never needed, but likely to be needed in the current environment, mounting point for security operations and the protection of the citizens of Sydney in that space. Now, I was invited recently to a consultation process with the Assistant Minister in Sydney. It was interesting in that consultation process. I thought we were having input, but it was really a refutation process whereby it didn't really matter what our views were. The decision had been taken that Victoria Barracks was to be divested from the Defence Estate portfolio. The interesting part about that was that the Assistant Minister was of the view that the security operations that I spoke about could be mounted out of Randwick Barracks, which also has some elements of it being disposed of in this process. But it was made quite clear to the Minister that his briefing on that matter was wrong, that Victoria Barracks was actually the mounting point, and we train annually, a number of times a year, for the mounting of special force operations in support of the civil power in the Sydney CBD. That's probably a mouthful, but that's the basis of my argument. I could argue heritage. I could also say in that consultation process that I was struck by detailed questions being asked of the defence and finance bureaucrats who were supporting that meeting, that every time there was a difficult question, the response was, well, we haven't really thought through that issue yet. And so there's a little bit of this says to me that It was a briefing and a thought bubble where the implications of some of the things that they intend on doing have not been thought through.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I mean, we've got at Victoria Barracks in Sydney, we've got the Forces Command Headquarters, and the RAF base in Glenbrook is the Air Command Headquarters. They're both listed to be sold. And, you know, I'm in the same position as you, Ken. It seems strange to me that the government has decided to sell them before they've actually decided where they're going to go. So, in your view and your experience, would you see that as good military decision making?
No, and I don't believe that it was military decision making. I think it was bureaucratic decision making based on budget pressures and the ability to try and bring money into the defence portfolio. So, you know, I don't mind if I'm wrong in this process. But so far I'm not, and the question that I'm asking to be answered by the government is, if you're looking to get rid of this piece of estate, then how are you going to handle the security implications that come from that divestment? And I haven't seen any responses to that by anybody in the debate at the present time. So that concerns me. There are other issues that concern me. We were told quite clearly that the cost of maintenance in Victoria Barracks is very expensive. It's true, it's a heritage building and it's going to be expensive. And therefore, we could get rid of that estate and we could pump tens of millions of dollars a year into a leased facility in the heart of Sydney. So we're looking to divest from a state that we own, where we can improve and maintain it and use it off into the future, and investing in a facility that we simply don't own, which seems to me over time to potentially be a dead investment. The other part of that, of course, is that the Defence Plaza in Sydney is not a place where you could manoeuvre for or conduct operations in any way. So if the issue is the number of people in the barracks, the number of people at Randwick, the number of people in the Defence Plaza, and we don't occupy all of those facilities fully, then it seems to me that there's another way of doing it without divesting ourselves of a piece of our national heritage. I mean, Victoria Barracks was a place where New South Wales soldiers went to war in the Boer War and came home Australian soldiers. It's sort of that significant in our history. And I think the other thing that I would say, if we're pushed for time here, is that since this announcement's been made, it's quite clear that there is a quite significant public opposition to the divestment of Victoria Barracks. And, you know, that's prime ministers of both political persuasions, ex-prime ministers of both political persuasions. The Premier of New South Wales is certainly against it. And if I was in his position, I'd be asking the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister how they intend to handle the security implications for issues that might arise in Sydney and its effect on the people of this city.
And it is very interesting the point you make about Defence Plaza Sydney and Defence Plaza Melbourne. You know, we've heard down here at Victoria Barracks there's some 1,500 people working at Victoria Barracks in Melbourne. I think there's about 750, 800 at Victoria Barracks in Sydney. And to move those across into a couple of corporate leased buildings, I think, you know, that are already, I think, stretched thin. I think it's just a logistical nightmare just on top of all of that. We also heard from the Defence Minister that, you know, part of the reason for selling off these sites is that they have limited community access, but I don't think the community will be looking to go into these defence plazas. I don't think it's going to have the same ring to it. But anyway, there we go.
That's true. And you know, Victoria Barracks in the past, in my time as the then Land Commander and being the commander of the barracks, there was much more public access to the facility than there is now. But that public access dropped away after September 11, and we an uncertainty about our security environment, and so we tightened security around those bases. We've never let that off. But Victoria Barracks in Sydney is certainly at times open to the public to go through. There are tours conducted through the establishment. And so if public access is an issue, then there can be other solutions to allow more public access to the barracks so they can actually participate in the heritage and history of this, fantastic facility.
And Lancer Barracks is a case in point, Ken, the most visited site in all of Parramatta. It opens its doors regularly to the public, and I believe, still conducts or has conducted counter-terrorism training there before. Just final question from me before we move on. When the auditors appeared before this committee, one of them was of the opinion that there were too many parade grounds and too many messes. Can you just give us some insight into what these institutions mean and what role they have in Australia's Defence Force?
Yes. Messes is one of those issues that's been under discussion for a long time. At its heart, the mess structure is part of the military culture. It's the ability to separate levels of responsibility from each other so that when they start to enjoy downtime or social life, etc., they're not compromising themselves through the chain of command. Now, some of the mess structures around the barracks over the years were certainly wasteful of resources. But I think, with major developments like you see in Townsville and other places now, you're able to maintain, the soldiers' mess, the sergeants' mess, the officers' mess, for all of the cultural and leadership issues that they were envisaged in the first place, but make very efficient use of the actual kitchens and facilities that make those things work. So, I think messes is a red herring, and it's often spoken about by people who don't understand that there is a military culture, and that military culture, in my humble view, is a necessary part of preparing people to do what the government asks them to do on a pretty frequent basis. Parade grounds and things. So the Victoria Barracks Parade Ground's an interesting one. There's only one there, but it's also the landing site for care flight helicopters, and in defence emergencies, helicopters that can support special force operations, etc. So parade grounds are often part of the military life, and it's not about marching in and doing things. It's about preparing for operations. If you were to go to Townsville, where there's a plethora of parade grounds, or Brisbane, then those parade grounds are also often the mounting place where the troops prepare, form up, line up all of their equipment. The helicopters come in and take them off to wherever it is that we're doing it. There are space inside the military complex that we can use for mounting operations. So I find that a lot of that debate is really misinformed. It doesn't truly understand how all of those things go together to make a military base, and they don't all necessarily have a single use. They can be multi-use facilities.
Can I just ask a question following on from that? We heard on last Monday that there is a push for culture change in the ADF, and they want to change the names of bases. In terms of, can you just reflect on that, please?
My personal view is that's part of a woke agenda. We have our bases named. We have our bases named a lot based on our military history, our forebears. We name them after people who played important roles in the evolution of our military over time. It's not something that I would rush in to do. It also, when you do all of those things, you just think of the little administrative changes for letterheads and signage and all of that sort of stuff that goes with it. So when we're going to sell a state to create money to help the defence portfolio fund what it wants to do, then as far as I'm concerned, that sort of agenda is just a waste of money.
Thank you very much, Ken. I'll pass it on to Senator Shoebridge.
You say it's a woke agenda? I don't think anyone's doing it because they're concerned about historical references. It just seems to be a way of disconnecting the sites from their history to make it easier to sell them. I don't think I'd call that a woke agenda. I'd call that an accountancy agenda. Unless you know something that I don't know.
No. Look, Senator, I'm not going to argue that. I mean, it's a good point. The point that I'm trying to make is that right now, when we seem to be so short of dollars, it's something that people are planning to do that will require dollars, and it's not important right now. It's a bound or an evolution beyond.
But it might be useful if you've got a bureaucratic mentality and you want to destroy history and connections with a place and make them seem like vanilla units that you could just sell. Like that there doesn't seem to be a rational purpose for it in terms of military. It just seems to be trying to sort of break that history and connection, so make it easier to sell them in the future.
I couldn't disagree with that as an argument. It's a little bit like, there's a very strong push that people enlist in the Australian Defence Force. And bureaucratically, that's what they do. But you don't find anybody out there in the recruiting areas who are looking to join the Australian Defence Force. They're looking to join the Army, Navy and Air Force. And their exposure to those things comes from our military history, driving past bases, doing all of those sorts of things. So I just think it's a change that's not necessary, and we should just leave that alone at the present time.
Yeah, yes. One of the remarkable things as we've gone to different sites is we've asked the current occupants of the site. Now, whether that's, for example, Headquarters Forces Command in Victoria Barracks in Sydney, which has a really critical role inside defence, as you would be aware from your time there. We ask them, well, what's the plan once the land's sold out from under you? Where are you going to go? And inevitably the answers we get, doesn't matter where we've been, that there is no articulated plan, there's an ongoing consultation, we're not sure what's going to happen. This seems a remarkable way of running any organisation. To make a decision to sell the land from underneath key capabilities, and once you've made that decision to then start sort of retrospectively working where you're going to send them. Have you seen this before in your time in defence?
Sadly, I've seen it before, but I'm really supporting everything that you're saying here. One of the issues that came out of the consultation day I had is the assistant minister was supported by defence officials and finance officials. And what was really interesting is the interest group from local councils, local members, heritage groups, Sydney City Council, etc., around the table asked questions. The thing that really was driven home to me in that session was the number of times when the minister asked the bureaucrats for help, they said that we haven't yet thought that part of it through. That's yet got to be worked out. So in some ways, it's like there's been a thought bubble thrown out, and the implications of that thought bubble haven't yet been thought through.
Well, we had a tour of Victoria Barracks in Melbourne today, and there's more than 1,500 ADF staff in Victoria Barracks, all doing critical work with inside, I think it's CAS-G. And we asked, well, what's the plan for those 1,500 staff who have functioning, existing office spaces and workspaces? We were told that some of them might be located into Defence Plaza in Melbourne, but it's not big enough to take everybody else, and they don't have a plan for everybody else. Have you heard any more intelligent planning when it comes to Victoria Barracks in Sydney?
No, there has been no more intelligent planning. And the part that worries me a lot is that quite clearly people inside the ADF at the present time have been quite hamstrung on being able to say anything about this. I have a lot of people reach out to me and saying, thank you for speaking on our behalf. But that uncertainty that you correctly highlight, because there isn't a plan, as I said, it's a thought bubble still at the present time. The implication of those uncertainties on families, on children's schooling, on where people might have to live, whether or not they're going to be moved interstate to be able to fit into a defence facility somewhere else, I think that's a really big issue, and I would like to see that formally addressed in a proposal that we could have a look at. The other thing that you probably see from the committee is that from time to time, and I know there's been a recent activity to look at defence mobilisation plans. And at the same time that we're saying that the world's an uncertain place and we need to dust off mobilisation plans, etc., at the very same time we're divesting ourselves of the estate where we might expand into if we had to mobilise. So no, I haven't seen
the foyer
a
of
cogent...
Defence Plaza. You can meet in the foyer of Defence Plaza.
Absolutely, and we can invest in a facility we don't own. Yeah, so no, Senator, I'm in agreement with you. There is no plan that I can see, and the other thing is that if you understand the defence structure, it's interesting. People ask, was the Chief of Army, Navy, or Air Force consulted in this? And the answer is yes. And then you ask the question, was the Chief of Joint Operations consulted in this? And the answer is no. Well, why is that important? Well, it's important because military operations in Australia aren't conducted by the Chief of Army and Navy and Air Force. They're conducted by the Chief of Joint Operations. And it would be nice to have his views on how he's going to be able to do all of these security operations and mount them into the future when he's losing bases that are key to his military planning.
It'd be interesting to know the conversations that led to the Chief of Army, Navy and Air Force signing that letter. It's got all the look of a sort of, a hostage situation, doesn't it? You will agree and sign it and be happy.
Well, I have been trying to use my contacts to find out how that went, but everybody's being very loyal at the present time.
Yeah. The final thing about Victoria Barracks at Sydney is you mentioned some of the other community sort of social and public uses for it. I understand it's also a heli base for St Vincent's Hospital as well, and that site is actually important for air evacuations to St Vincent's Hospital. Was that part of what was happening when you were there on the site?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been happening there for many years, and it's not a frequent arrival, but there'd be more Carefly helicopters arrive and depart at night in Victoria Barracks than would be Black Hawk helicopters. But the whole point of it is a safe landing point for large helicopters in the middle of the CBD, and it's very important to the survival of some people who come from road accidents, etc., through the St Vincent's Hospital.
And you would have thought you'd need an answer to that fundamental life-saving role that's provided. You'd need an answer to that before you decided to sell it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, I agree with you, and sort of the bureaucratic view is, well, that's not our problem. That's a New South Wales and St Vincent's Hospital problem. So we won't figure that in. But in essence, Victoria Barracks is at the heart of the Sydney community and has been since the 1800s.
Yep. Thanks, Kenneth.
Just a quick question on the consultation. As the former head of Army, were you consulted either? Were you consulted at all?
No. I saw it in a newspaper, and I was asked by journalists what my views on it were, and the minister, when he was confronted with this, said he didn't really care what retired senior officers had to say, or washed out defence bureaucrats, I think was the term. Peter Khalil, the Assistant Minister, was much kinder to me in the press last week and said that, despite my skills and expertise, there would be some things on which we would disagree, and this was one of them. But the point is that all I've been asking is, well, give me an answer to the question on how we're going to look after security operations if we have a counter-terrorism problem in the heart of Sydney.
It's a very good question indeed. Well, thank you. No. Thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Gillespie, and we appreciate the testimony that you've given. Any questions on notice, if you could please return them by Monday, the 1st of June. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I now welcome Dr. James Uncles. Thank you. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
James William Uncles, and I've put in a submission to the committee together with a copy of my opening statement.
Thank you. And would you like to make a quick opening statement, Mr.
Yes.
Please. Please.
I'll say at the outset, this inquiry is a fascinating aspect of review of the impact of the government's decision to sell a large number of defence establishments. I noticed the Prime Minister made a visit to Tasmania recently on the sale of a defence estate to populate with housing. My focus is on a significant aspect of the inquiry, and that is the impact on defence cadets. Now, I have to say at the outset, I've never been involved with the management of defence cadets. However, my extensive military experience, I've observed cadets in defence establishments. I served for a number of years in HMAS Cerberus in Victoria, but also in Canberra and also defence establishments in Sydney. You'll see from my opening statement that I quoted from Cadet Corporal Braden Verter-Reed. I came across his quote amongst a lot of information about cadets, and I thought it encapsulates the essence of what cadetship is about. Without detracting from scouts, cadets form a very different aspect of leadership. I was a cadet, a scout myself when I was a lot younger. But the cadetship in the ADF falls into a very different category. The synergy between ADF cadets and defence establishments cadets in the ADF and defence establishment cannot be remediated by the sale of defence assets. Being being an accredited mediator with long service in the ADF, but also as a legal officer and logistics officer, I'm into resolution. And in my submission and the opening statement, I've made suggestion about how to preserve the nexus between cadets and defence establishments. The future of the cadet program, in my view, from what I've experienced in the ADF with cadets, is about recruitment. People of my age, people who've gone through the ADF and served the ADF, which I've done for over 35 years, it's about looking at the future. And 16 and 17-year-olds are the emphasis of future recruiting. If you relegate cadets to public schools, assets that are within the public domain, you're not going to have the same strength, I say strength, that you have with cadets in defence establishments. At Cerberus, for example, I saw what cadets do, and Navy cadets, so in Navy myself. The essence is about aligning the cadet with the ADF mentality of leadership and direction. Now, in the case of the quote from Cadet Corporal Braden Reid, he talks about his aspirations to be a pilot. How is he going to realise that opportunity by going to community centres, schools, public spaces? He needs alignment, in my view, with the Air Force. The same with Navy cadets. They need an alignment with Navy establishments, where there are patrol boats, where there are ships. Cerberus, a massive establishment. There may be cadets that are interested in engineering. Cerberus offers that connection. I believe that my suggestion to the committee is to say to government, have one establishment in each state and territory. There'll be logistics issues with that, I realise that, transport and so forth. But isn't that an appropriate alignment to bring cadets, to remain cadets, to build their interest in leadership and personal development? You and I know what personal development is about. We've experienced it. You're talking about 16 and 17-year-olds who aspire possibly to a career in the ADF. The data on recruiting is very clear, and the committee will be aware of the data figures on those who transition from cadetship to the ADF. Not all succeed, some drop out, but many aspire to that career. And I'm saying, through the committee, to the government, to this government and any future government, the way to embrace cadetship is to give them a sense of pride and purpose. Pride and purpose is wearing the uniform, having volunteers and parents, carers that support their decision. Quite frankly, I can't see how it's going to work if you say to cadets, next week we're going to do drill marching at a local school or a community centre. It just doesn't cut the mustard, quite frankly. The thing, if you've entered a defence establishment, you know what the induction's like. You go through the process, you meet the conditions of service within that establishment. So my push is to urge you to say to the government, there is an argument to say, sell whatever establishments you want to sell. That will happen. And the committee has heard a lot of evidence about the impact that might have on the ADF. My focus in my submission and the opening statement is about ensuring that cadets have the nexus with what defence is about. Defence is about, it's not just about tanks and ships and aircraft, it's about the mentality of service. You're not going to get the mentality of service by going to a school or a public space. I've heard what the Defence Minister has had to say. Quite frankly, it's not sufficient. It doesn't make sense. For Scouts it does, but not for Cadets. Cadets take, I'm not having a go at Scouts. Scouts serve, I've got a grandson who's in Scouts. Great idea, but once you elevate to the cadetship in the ADF, you've got uniform, you've got rank, you've got carers and instructors who are former ADF personnel, with the support of parents and carers. It makes all the difference. And I urge the committee to have a look at what a resolution looks like. The resolution is about respecting the government's decision to have a fire sale on establishments, but push for a recommendation to preserve the integrity of cadets. Cadets have been around, as you know, for decades. We must ensure that the integrity is continued to instill in young people the desire to serve as cadets. Not all will go through to the ADF, but a big percentage do. We can't ignore the 32-odd thousand cadets that are currently serving, and there are more to come. And at the era of defence review that's going on at the moment, submarines, more equipment, more expenditure, we must look at young people. They are the future of the ADF, not I've done my bit, but it's about the future. And I just think that if we're going to encourage cadets with their supporters and reservists who support them, we must do them honour to ensure that they have some symbiotic connection with defence establishments. Look, it's a big call. What I've suggested is a big call, but it's a compromise. It serves the integrity of the future of cadets, while saying to the government, this government or the next government, whatever it is, that establishments play an integral part in fostering the expansion of cadets. 32,000 cadets can't be ignored, and their supporters can't be ignored. Relegating them, as I've said in fairly blunt language, relegating them to civilian areas, sources, schools, public spaces, halls and so forth, for me, being through the system, it just doesn't make sense to me. And the government has to be prepared to negotiate, and this lies with the committee, about recommending a compromise.
Thank you. And I have to admit that not much of of any of this makes any sense to me either. We're just trying to make our way through this and understand it better. And we visited Victoria Barracks in Sydney. There is a cadet unit on site in a beautiful historic building there. And we heard about how a lot of cadets come from out of area specifically to go to that site. And on the question of where that cadet unit would go, they hadn't decided yet, possibly somewhere in the local area, possibly, remaining there despite the rest of the serving members having vacated. I think either of those choices strips the magic and the significance from serving in that particular unit. And as you say, it'll be a spanner in the works for trying to recruit these kids, because they do sign up for that, feeling that significance, feeling that connection and the nexus to the ADF. I wanted to ask you about, before I move on, I guess the connection of the cadet stream to defence capability. Can you just explain that to me, please?
Capability is all about recruitment. It always has been. Since the ADF was formed, since the Army was formed, since the Navy was formed, our history, capability is only measured by two things: recruitment, people, sailors, Navy people, Air Force people, and logistics, the equipment, to be able to deliver a defence outcome. We could debate this question for some time, but at the end of the day, we are looking at recruitment in the ADF is weak. It's falling off for lots of reasons, world events and so forth. My grandson, who's in the cadets, is interested in my career in the ADF. He may aspire to being a cadet. I don't know. There's no pressure. But I'm simply accentuating what going forward on the government's defence plan is about: building submarines and aircraft and tanks, but it's about encouraging people to join. And quite frankly, there's nothing better, if you haven't, well, I assume you've been to Cerberus, but there's nothing better than when you drive into Cerberus and you experience the difference. You go through the main gate, you go through security, and you are inducted. And if you are a cadet, you might do it once a month, you might do it whenever, but it instills a sense of pride that I am, as a cadet, serving Australia. I may not be a recruit into the ADF, but I'm a cadet. And I've got a uniform, and I've got instructors, and there's a sense of command and structure. You don't get that, quite frankly, going to a local school or a hall. It's just not the same. It hasn't got the same temperament, and it doesn't instill. I'm not having a go at schools and public spaces, but the point I'm making is walking into a defence establishment makes all the difference. And it gives you purpose, structure. Your instructors give you a program as a cadet.
We've seen from the audit report that there are a lot of rifle ranges being sold off. Tasmania is taking quite a big hit with the selling of the cancelling of the leases for the training ships. The cadet program, the reserves program in Tasmania particularly, is going to be hard hit by this process. Can you just reflect on that and whether you think it's a strategic mistake to be doing that?
Look, I think it's a big ask, quite frankly. I think if it's, to coin a phrase, if it's not broken, why tamper with it? The cadet history is a significant aspect of the ADF, its history. I've served at a number of establishments, Victoria Barracks, Melbourne and Sydney. I've served on ships. It's, for me, you might say I'm indoctrinated, but I'm not. I know what works, and the opportunity for cadets to have opportunities in defence establishments to drill, meet with other ADF personnel, makes all the difference. And I just don't see what comments from the government about looking at civilian sources is going to make up for the break of the connection with defence establishments. My focus, I've put up a suggestion. I urge the committee to look at making a recommendation to government. Sell off what you need to. If it's surplus, we saw the Prime Minister's announcement in Tasmania yesterday. Do that. But give the cadets an opportunity to be aligned to one establishment in each state or territory. It'll present logistics issues, for sure, travel, so forth, but that can be overcome. Instead of pouring money into schools and public spaces, spend the money on getting cadets into those establishments. Maintain the history. And that's what I'm pushing for.
Well, I think the issue that we've discovered through these hearings is that, you know, this audit, this review, desktop, you know, it's using that clause of surplus land and not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And I think the understandings of those completely disregard, well, for one, the strategic value of the sites that they are divesting. We heard today about Point Cook and the strategic value that it provides, Victoria Barracks, HMAS Penguin, the list goes on.
Yep.
But that also, you know, this idea of surplus and not fit for purpose has overlooked the heritage and the cultural and the social values and connections that these bases have and continue to serve. So I guess, do you think the fact that the auditors don't have any military experience, that they, you know, barely visited these sites, had a big impact on the legitimacy of this review?
Well, I haven't had direct experience with managing cadets, but I've been in environments where I've seen them, and I've spoken to, over the years, Navy personnel that have had that experience. Take HMR Cerberus, for example. HMR Cerberus has been around for a mighty long time. It is the core recruiting site for Navy. I've had a number of years working at Cerberus. If Cerberus was used as an example of monitoring or recruiting cadets in Victoria, Cerberus is ideal. It's got all the bells and whistles, recruiting, engineering, seamanship and so forth. What I'm saying is it's a matter of the committee identifying not the surplus, but identifying what could be used to keep cadets engaged. If you're not going to have, look, I just can't see Navy cadets going to a local school and walking around and drilling. It's about cadets like the RAF cadets having an experience with touching stuff, and it's like the Army cadets up at Puckapunyal. That's what matters, and you won't get that in schools and public spaces. Schools and public spaces have a place for schooling and activities for children in the local area. But ADF cadets are above that. They are in a different category. And I think the government, what does it matter to the government if you retain one active defence establishment to support cadets? What does it really matter? They talked about spending the money to put cadets into public spaces, schools and so forth. Why waste that money? Why not use that money? Sorry.
No, you're right. And thank you for today, Dr. Uncle. I just want to ask you, in terms of you said the one site, are you saying one combined site for all three services, or would there be one site, Navy site, one Air Force site, one Army site? I just wanted to get some clarity from your recommendation before the committee, because you've identified three here in the state of Victoria. I'm not particularly familiar with other states, but I know with Victoria, there are three sites at three different purposes. But is that what you're suggesting, or are you saying one combined site for all of, let's say, Victoria, all of New South Wales, all of Queensland, etc., for cadets to go to? Because it would be a bit of a challenge, I'd imagine, for larger states. Well, I mean, Victoria's still a very large state, but
sure,
is that what you're trying to get to here?
Everything's up for compromise. Yeah. That's what mediation's all about. Finding a solution to preserve what we have to keep going forward. The hook, the ADF, it can't be denied, the evidence is overwhelming. The hook for the ADF is cadets provide a stream of recruitment. You can't deny it. Sorry, not you personally. No. You can't deny that. So in Victoria, for example, I would see Cerberus as the focus for cadets in Victoria. Now, one might say, well, what about Puckapunyal for Army? It's about, or Laverton for Air Force. But we've got to look at bringing the priority for cadets to the front of the agenda, not at the back. The cadets need to be given the respect, and their supporters the respect that they deserve, because this is all about feeding the National Defence Strategy. The Defence Strategy is marching on, and we need recruitment to provide that.
Just mindful of time, but I'm just asking, so the figures you've provided here on page 1, like 4,000 Army cadets, 9,500 Air Force cadets, and 2,600 Navy cadets from Victoria, are they your figures, or these figures that you got from the website? Where did you source that information from?
Well,
is it public?
Well, it's a matter of unpacking the agenda and the dialogue and finding a solution, rather than just saying to the government, sell the lot. It's about finding a compromise, and that's what I'm urging the committee to have a look at, as to what compromise you could make to the government.
I guess I just wanted some clarity. So you're saying, because when I had those figures, that's half of the total national figure, 32,000. So you're saying half the cadets nationally are from Victoria, which is not a bad problem, I'll be honest. But I just wanted to double check to see, and that's another line that why is it working well here in Victoria as opposed to other states? It might be something for you to take on notice. I'm just mindful of the time, because we've got to wrap up very soon.
Sure.
But thank you for today's evidence. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, I get a bit animated, but only because I'm passionate. I'm passionate about having served, and I know the future of the ADF is about recruitment, and all recruitment does not come from people who just walk off the street.
Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony today, Dr. Uncles. And that now concludes the hearing. If you do have any questions on notice, I'm not sure if one was just placed then, but if you could please return it by Monday, the 1st of June, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
And that concludes today's hearing. Thank you to all the witnesses who appeared, and to Hansard and Broadcasting for their assistance. The committee stands adjourned.